Hello everyone, hope you're all doing great. I'm F. Merlin Rodriguez, and today we are going to start a new chapter, The Story of an Hour, written by Kate Chapman. Kate Chapman is considered as one of the pioneers of American feminist writing because of her unconventional lifestyle and novel ways of portraying women's changing identity in the 19th century American literature. Kate Chapman was born in St. Louis of the United States on February 8, 1851, to a well-to-do couple, Thomas O'Flaherty and Eliza Ferris O'Flaherty. After the death of her father in an accident when she was 5 years old, she was raised in a household that consisted of her mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. Her mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother chose to remain widows after their husband's death. Consequently, Chapman learned how important women's independence could be, and that idea could permeate much of her writing later on. After her graduation, she married Oscar Chapman, son of a Louisiana cotton planter. Before and after the marriage, she was an unconventional nonconformist who made friendship with the slaves of the family, smoked in public, and bathed open on the beaches. A financial crisis in 1879 and the untimely death of her husband in 1883 left her with 6 children in dire economic crisis, and to overcome the crisis, she decided to take up writing professionally. She began her career with short fictions and essays, and in 1890, At Fault, her first novel, was published. In her novel, The Awakening, published in 1899, Chapman controversially anticipates some of the major concerns of the feminist movement. The major themes of her novels were the examination of unhappy marriages, the question of divorce in a rational, unemotional manner, and the theme of love outside marriage. Besides the 2 novels, Chapman authored about 100 short stories and some essays. Most of them were about the Creole society of the South of America. Creole were the people of mixed European and black descent. She was also known as a fast and prolific writer, and by the end of the 1900s, she had written over 100 stories, articles, and essays. Unfortunately, Chapman would pass away from an suspected cerebral hemorrhage in 1904 at the age of 54. The work, The Story of an Hour, is a short story that was originally published on December 6, 1894 in Vogue magazine under the title The Dream of an Hour. Vogue is an American monthly fashion and lifestyle magazine that covers many topics including fashion, beauty, culture, living, and runway. The short story brilliantly explores the concept of marriage from a feminist perspective as a site of confinement. This story, which appeared in St. Louis Life the following year as a story of an hour, has been much anthologized and is still studied. Like Chopin's best-known work, the 1899 novel, The Awakening, this short story was controversial when it first appeared. The word meaning controversial is a work which is likely to give rise to public disagreement. So children, let's start reading the short story, The Story of an Hour, written by Kate Chapman. I'll be reading the text, 1 or 2 paragraphs, and I'll explain. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. The meaning of the word afflicted is affected adversely or has pain or trouble. Here, the character Mrs. Mallard, who has been introduced to us, has the heart trouble, heart problem, and they have taken great care to break the news or say the news that her husband is dead. Let's continue reading. It was her sister Josephine who told her in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Her husband's friend Richards was there too near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Bentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. The meaning of the word veiled hence means not openly or directly. Concealing is to hide or cover up something. The word meaning of forestall is to prevent or block. Let's continue reading. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once, with sudden, wild abandonment in her sister's arms. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her. The word meaning of paralyzed is incapable of movement. Now let's start listening to the meaning of these paragraphs. So we could see that Mrs. Mallard has heart trouble, so she must be informed carefully about her husband's death. Therefore, her sister Josephine tells the news with veiled hints, not openly or directly, but with broken sentences. Mrs. Millard's husband's friend Richard learned about this railroad disaster when he was in the newspaper office and saw Mrs. Millard's husband's name, that is Bentley, on the list of those killed. The author says Mrs. Millard did not get paralyzed or stand paralyzed as soon as she heard about her husband's death, but she started crying suddenly, and with wild abandonment she fell on her sister's arm and she let out all her griefs. And when the storm of grief had spent itself, meaning Mrs. Millard had finished weeping, she went away to her room all alone. She would not allow anyone to follow her. So in the first few paragraphs, we got introduced to the characters. Here, the main character, Mrs. Millard, she has some heart trouble, and her sister Josephine is taking care to reveal the news of her husband's death. The husband's death has been informed, or the news is brought by Mrs. Millard's husband's friend Richard. He has double-checked, confirmed it, and he has come to say the news. After hearing the news, Mrs. Millard doesn't stand shocked or paralyzed, but she starts weeping. When she finished her weeping or sobbing, she goes upstairs to her room all alone without letting anyone to follow her. So children, we will read and understand the rest of the story in the next part. Thank you, children.